Oh, right, yeah, carrying on with this Frankist thing, and then we'll be back to the New World Order one, because I see Braden sent the next part of that one. But yeah, I'm going to finish this first. But yeah, let's go.
When the American government under FDR chose not to lift a finger to save the Jews from Hitler's inferno, America was not great. They slammed the door shut even to Jews who miraculously were able to escape from the clutches of Nazi Germany. How great was that? And during the Six-Day War, America sent a spy ship, the USS Liberty, to the Mediterranean to relay vital military information to Israel's enemies. How great was that? Although Trump can make America...
This bro is real bad. Why would you say that? Because that has not, like, I've watched things on the USS Liberty. Even someone like Dennis Prager said in his letter to Candace Owens, from what I can see of the USS Liberty, that was a deliberate attack. And he's like, I don't know why they did it. I don't know why the American and Israeli government covered it up. And he's like, I wish I knew. I wish I had that answer, but I don't. He's like, that is extremely suspicious. But to blame that one action on all of the Jewish people is ridiculous. But him saying that America was there to give information, I've not seen anybody say that, even other Jewish people. No one knows what that was or what happened in that incident.
and more prosperous, he cannot make America great. And that is not what he was chosen for. I believe he has a much greater historic role. It is no accident that Trump was anointed by God in Pennsylvania, where the Declaration of Independence was signed. The MAGA movement needs to be tweaked from Make America Great Again to Make America Godly Again. Donald Trump has taken the first step by proclaiming to the whole world that which is clear to anyone who wishes to see. The entire episode on Shabbat of July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania was clearly orchestrated by God, and the fact that President Trump turned his head a mere second before the shot grazed his ear was clearly miraculous. I believe this man was chosen to be the one to represent Western society in greeting the Messiah in Jerusalem, chosen to bow his head in humility to Mashiach, and to offer America's complete unconditional assistance to completely eradicate all of the enemies of the Jews and of God, and in the establishment of the eternal kingdom of the Messiah, son of David, who will lead all of mankind to lead moral and holy lives. Numbers chapter 24, where it was specifically a non-Jewish prophet, Bilam, who was chosen to proclaim in the name of God almost 3,300 years ago. I see it, but not now. I perceive it, but not in the near future. A star shall go forth from Jacob, and a staff shall arise in Israel, crushing their enemies and dominating all of mankind. Edom shall be demolished, and Israel shall be triumphant. May we all witness this speedily in our days. Amen.
The stars, Jesus.
Statue called the Statue of Liberty. It's holding the torch of illumination, which is the Promethean torch of Freemasonry. And if you go to the Statue of Liberty, you'll see a bronze plaque inside saying that this was given to the government of America by the French Grand Orient Temple Masons. And it is a symbol of Grand Orient Freemasonry in America, the holder of the light. And that's exactly the same torch that is carried during the Olympics. It is the torch of Prometheus.
It's not the torch of freedom.
No, it's not the torch of freedom.
Of the Illuminati.
Illumination. To add also that on the back of the Liberty dime, on the back of the old dime in America, there was the fasci, which you look in the encyclopedia or dictionary, you look at the word fascism, you'll see that the symbol for world fascism was a bundle of sticks, a bundle of rods with a hatchet head. That was on the back of the
Well, you see that
dime.
on each side of the speaker's podium at Congress.
Oh, absolutely.
So they have the fasci on each side.
Absolutely, and it's also the symbol for the United States Senate is the fasci. But the point I want to make is that was on the old dime. Now on the new dimes, you will see it has been transplanted a torch instead of the old fasci, because fascism was used at one time to prepare the world for the New World Order. Now the New World Order is in place. That's why on the dollar bill it says Novus Ordo Seclorum is New Order of the World.
Everything burns.
ScipioRadio.com present The Tamar Yonah Show.
I have joining me today Dr. and Rabbi Marvin Antelman. Welcome to the show, Rabbi.
Thank you very much for having me here.
So we're going to find out today, who are these people behind the scenes who are possibly infiltrating our organizations, the Jewish people, our media, our education, all sorts of spheres of life. Who are these people? Who can we trust? And where do you fit in this devious agenda for control in the world? So, Rabbi Antelman, you were telling me before we started the show that this happens to be the time of the 250-year anniversary of the Council of Four Lands. In Hebrew, you say that as?
Actually, it's the 250th anniversary of a special cherem, which was the next communication in the ban that they issued. And it's very, very pertinent to us today. And I'll try to bring the connection. First of all, let me say this. There are a lot of conspiracy theories out there. I'm not interested in theories. I'm interested in facts. So the scholarship over the years that I've utilized are sources that are impeccable. For example, Anthony Sutton, professor at Stanford University, wrote 2 books. He wrote more than 2 books, but 2 books which are relevant to what I'm going to speak about. One of his books was Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, and Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. There he goes through a lot of trouble to document the connection between the leaders of the Council on Foreign Relations, which is an acronym also for Carnegie, Ford, and Rockefeller, who provided the main funding for this.
Interesting.
And he's a professor with impeccable credentials. And then there is the late Professor Carroll Quigley, who was professor of political science at Georgetown University. Matter of fact, he was even quoted when Clinton became president in his inaugural address. He quoted Quigley as one of his people that he had studied under. So Quigley was very well known. The CFR loved him, and he decided that he would do a very nice thing. He would reciprocate the love and put out a book called Tragedy and Hope. Well, when it came out and it spoke so much about the CFR activities that they didn't want people to know about, they turned against him. And he himself then reassessed his position with them and wrote a book called The Anglo-American Establishment, where he claimed that a handful of people were running the world. And those 2 books are impeccable as source material, but there's other impeccable source material, and that is the scholarly works that were put out by professors at Hebrew University to deal with what we call the Sabbatian conspiracy, which I'll go to in one moment in our history. Let me preface those remarks by saying that, as every Jew well knows, right out of the Haggadah, and every generation they're out to destroy us, and every generation has its killers and persecutors of the Jews. In the 17th century, it was Chmielnitsky who headed the Cossacks, who was out to destroy Jews and did terrible atrocities, killing hundreds of thousands of Jews in Poland. The atrocities were terrible, and to commemorate this terrible series of events, the Jews kept a fast day, the 20th day of Sivan, to commemorate this, which was this past Friday, commemorates the Chmielnitsky massacres. Today, it's no longer an active fast day, but it was observed for a few hundred years. In any event, on the 20th day of Sivan every year, the Vad Arba Rotzot, which was the Council for Lands, which is the biggest tribunal of its kind at that time, met once a year on this date and took up questions of Jewish law and other things.
So these were very big rabbis, leaders of the community, who were on this Council of the Four Lands.
The Council of Four Lands was backed up by no less than the King of Poland. It began in 1520 and lasted till 1764. It consisted of 30 rabbis, 15 of who were lay leaders and were rabbis, and the others were not lay leaders, they were full-time rabbis. They were dealing with a problem that was a byproduct of the Khmelnytsky massacres. What happened was when the Jews were massacred like that, people were speaking again about redemption. We were looking around for redemption. And all of a sudden, a man by the name of Shabbatai Tzvi, who was born in 1626 and died in 1676, came along and said, I am the Messiah. And he had a tremendous following. When it was realized that his following was so great and there would be problems, the Sultan, because Shabtai Tzvi was from Izmir, came along and gave Shabtai a choice. Either you die or convert to Islam. So he converted. Now, there were about 1 million followers prior to the conversion. When the conversion happened, then there was disillusionment among the Jews. But there were some diehard people who set up different cults of Shabtai Tzvi. And the worst one of them was called the Domeh, which was a secret organization. And the Domeh was based in Turkey and in Salonika. And the Domeh gave rise to these terrible orgies that went on, which became part of the immorality theology of Shabtai Tzvi, corrupted later on. He apostatized himself 10 years before his death. So when he died in 1676, he had these cults doing all kinds of evil.
And the reason that these followers of Shabtai Tzvi were doing evil was because what?
Here's the thing. The Talmud says that the Messiah would come when everybody's good or everybody's bad. There is such a saying in the Talmud. So the Sabbatian said like this: it's impossible for everybody to be good. It's easy to be bad. So they turned around the Torah and they said, if you do an evil deed, then you will use up the energy of the universe, and it'll collapse, and you'll force Messiah to come because you will have used up all the evil in the world. So whenever they engage in an orgy, they would make a bracha, and every day they would figure out a way to do as many sins as possible. Like if you eat chaylev, you're chayav karet. In other words, if you eat fat, according to the Torah, you're to be excommunicated from your people. So they would eat fat that was prohibited, non-kosher fat, from a kosher animal, which is chaylev, which is in that category, like eating blood from a kosher animal.
So they would dafka do the opposite.
They do the opposite
in order to hasten the coming of the Messiah, which is totally ludicrous. These sound like people who were today fodder for all these Davidian, David Koresh cults and all the strangest cults you can find today. Would they be the same type of people?
Same type of people, exactly. As a matter of fact, what happened was then after that, after Shabtai Tzvi died, one of the most powerful Sabbatian cults, as they were called, was a transformation of the Domeh, the most extreme cult, to Europe through an insidious person by the name of Jacob Frank. He died in 1791. Now the Frankists started to spread and take over entire communities and make them satanic. Matter of fact, no less a personality than the Nobel Prize winner Isaac Bashevis Singer describes how a community was corrupted in his Satan and Garay, which is based on very well documented history. So one of the sources that I use is the late Professor Gershom Shalom, who wrote a lot about Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi, the Mystical Messiah, is a very, very thick book in Hebrew and in English. It goes through a lot of things. So to say that he was involved in conspiracy theories is ludicrous, because he has documented studies. There are other professors also, through Gershom Shalom, that were involved with their students at the Hebrew University and still continuing the Sabbatian studies, as they're called, because of the influence of this insidious group. And you can actually trace a line historically, which I do in my book, to the CFR from Shabtai Tzvi, and another organization called the Illuminati, which was founded in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt. And they were involved also in the French Revolution, which is also well documented.
So what you're saying is that there really does exist a new world order, that it's not a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy.
Conspiracy
and
fact.
You're a scientist, So you only deal with facts. You don't like to go on hearsay or on jumping to conclusions. Only fact. You've done research and you come to the conclusion. You don't have to come to the conclusion. It's right there in front of you. You've gathered the facts to show that these are conspiracies that are going on in the world. There is indeed people working in a new world order to try to make this, to try to take over the world power. That's what you're saying.
Right, and there's so many books on the side of the Jewish philosopher that it'd be very ludicrous to compare it, let's say, to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is fiction. So some of the professors at the time of Gershon Sholem was Jacob Katz. Professor Katz wrote a book called The Jews and Freemasonry, which gives a history of the interface between Jews and some of the cults that derived out of Shabtai Tzvi. But the next big cult that came from Shabtai Tzvi after the Domeh organization, which is in Turkey, the next big cult were the Frankists, as I mentioned with Jacob Frank. So Jacob Frank, the Vad Arba Ratzat, the Council of Four Lands, wanted to deal with Frank, and they decided to have a big excommunication on the 20th of Sivan 250 years ago. And there they made the following rulings. They said everybody that is a Frankist is to be excommunicated.
From the Jewish people.
From the Jewish people, bastards to the 10th generation, is what it said. And they prohibited people, because the Frankists were into Kabbalah, they prohibited the study of Kabbalah until you were 30 or 40 years old and you had a belly full, as they said, full of Talmud. Only then could you study the Kabbalah.
Right.
And they said they're women or whores, and they're hereby excommunicated from our people to the 10th generation.
This is what the Council of Four Lands labeled the Frankists,
right,
because they so deviated from Judaism and all that Judaism holds to be true and righteous. These people went off and made basically their own deformed religion, and so the Jews wanted nothing to do with them. They kicked them out.
That is correct.
Okay.
Now,
yeah, a lot of the anti-Jew people bring up the Talmud, but I don't know how like the Torah is really, and even then most Jews don't read that. They don't read the Talmud, they don't read the Torah, they read prayer books and they read something else, but they don't really read scripture. Not very many Jews around the world read the Bible or like the Old Testament. But you hear from all of this is that this is where Islam doesn't work in the modern world, because there are, like the Frankists said, we're finding things like that makes more sense as well. What they said that he thought, where it says in the Talmud, did he say that the end times will come when either everybody's all good and everybody's all bad? It's easier to make everybody all bad than all good. That makes more sense to me, and that's the trouble with the older scriptures. It's like if the Old Testament by itself was the Old Testament, Christianity would be just as much a problem in the world. Because I'll be honest with you, there's way more death and destruction in the Old Testament than there is in the Quran. But the fact of the matter is that it ends with Jesus. Like, and Jesus is basically a reforming of the old, and like that's what Islam needs. Islam needs a new prophet like Jesus to come along and kind of quash a lot of the old war mode things. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But yeah, I'd like to know how much, because it's a lot of the anti-Jew people bring up the Talmud because it's to turn Christians on Jews, because it says that Jesus is boiling in a pot of feces and semen in hell. Now, obviously, to a Christian, and that's the thing, this is what I like with the Jewish people, they don't understand that Jesus is their Messiah. Like the guy before talking about a Messiah, like the Jewish Messiah. He has already been. Like a Jew said, he's like, I looked into it, and one of the prophecies that the Messiah will be, after the Messiah has been stripped from the world, the temple will be destroyed by the nephew or something like that. And basically that happened in 70 AD with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. He's like, so, and it was by the emperor's nephew who led the attack. He's like, so I know exactly what they're talking about in that thing, which means the Messiah's already been. Jesus was the Messiah, like, because it was, prophesied that after the Messiah, the temple will be destroyed, and the temple got destroyed in 70 AD, like 40 years after Jesus died. Yeah, but that's what I mean. That's why you have to have Jesus, because there are things in the Old Testament. Like I say, there's a lot of murdering, a lot of killing in the name of God. And without the New Testament, Christianity is incredibly dangerous. And there's a lot of things in the Old Testament that you can take and spin to your own evil deed. And I'm sure it's true with the Talmud too. Just like it's true with the Quran. But this is what I mean. Everyone needs the Jesus part of the story. Without that, like, Jesus is the answer to all the horrific things in the old religious scriptures. Jesus is that answer. And yeah, this whole thing of trying to make a new political Israeli Messiah, like I say, that's all antichrist shit. And also, I was thinking as well, Jacob Frank is a bit like Hitler of the Jews, because kind of it was the Treaty of Versailles ultimately that led to Hitler. And how ridiculous! Like, they talk, Germany was a great nation before World War One, and I remember learning it at school that the Germans would have to have literally a wheelbarrow full of money to go and get a loaf of bread. Like, and he's like, it was the German money was so worthless after World War One that if you left your wheelbarrow full of money outside the shop, people would tip the money out and nick the wheelbarrow. Wheelbarrows was worth more than all of that pile of cash then in the thing. So you can see where that leads to people it's like they say, a drowning man will grab at the blade of a sword to be saved. Which you can see kind of is what the Germans did with Hitler. He was a very strong, going to rebuild Germany after they had been humiliated, basically. Like, not by losing the war, anyone can lose a war, but by the Treaty of Versailles. That was such a disgraceful, so, like, just out of order on Germany, that of course it was going to create a Hitler, basically. You're going to create that person. And from what he was saying with the persecution of the Jews, to then someone like Jacob Frank coming out and getting big support, you can see it's that same kind of mentality that, like I say, a drowning man will grab at the blade of a sword.
Studying the Frankist family trees, there was a family called the Bruschka, which is like first cousin of Jacob Frank. Gershom Scholem spent 6 months in Paris at the National Library to ferret out things about the French Revolution in connection with the Sabbatians. So you can't dispute this material. There's a direct line with the Jacobin Society and with the Illuminati. And Gershom Scholem writes concerning the Bruschka, he may have been, he said he was a member of the Illuminati, but he was devoted to Sabbatianism.
Are there non-Jews that joined this Sabbatian cult?
No, non-Jews did not join the Sabbatian cult, but the non-Jews did join the Illuminati.
and they worked together, and you're saying that these two cults or organizations or whatever had planned and staged the French Revolution?
Yes. They were involved in it, and Gershon Scholem proves it with the
Going back to because that's one thing about Jews as well. Jews don't want you to be Jewish. They don't force you. They don't force their thing onto you, like other religions do. But hold on. What did he just say? I forgot my track.
Planned and staged the French Revolution?
Yes. They were involved in it, and Gershon Scholem proves it with the personality of Babushka, who was
oh yeah, non-religious people. Because, like I say, reading the Bible, I fall more on the Protestant side, but I see a lot of Protestants that are kind of anti-Catholicism. Something I've noticed that why Catholicism is great is because it's the perfect thing for converts of other religions like Jews and Muslims, because it's very ritualistic like theirs is. So it's Catholicism, I think, is the closest to the Jewish and to the Muslim in terms of like how they worship, that it's easier for a Muslim, someone who's grounded in Islam or someone who's grounded in Jewish ritual, that they can cross over into, they tend to cross over and become Catholic, because Catholic still has that very ritualistic thing to it too. What I've noticed though is that or like atheists typically turn to be Protestant. If atheists go from not believing into reading the Bible, an atheist will typically become Protestant. But the religion, if you're a religious convert, they typically choose Catholicism, and I think it's that Catholicism has a very ritual, like saying Hail Mary. Hail Mary is a certain thing of words. It's exactly what Islam does. It's a certain phrasing of things that they repeat over and over and over again. Whereas there's kind of what Jesus was the answer to, because he said, look, you're doing all these ritual things, but none of you actually love God. None of you actually are godly people. You just think that doing these rituals is making you holier than thou. And I'm here to tell you, it ain't. Like, you can do all the ritual you want. If your heart is not pure, I ain't interested, bruh. The ritual is second to what comes first, and that's your relationship with God and Jesus, ultimately.
And he was beheaded on the guillotine because of his involvement.
Wasn't the French Revolution ultimately, I mean, forget about the beheadings because that was horrible, but wasn't it ultimately good? I mean, democracy came from that. You got rid of this, spoiled upper royal class, and the people took over. Wasn't that a positive thing?
There were positive and good things about it. The question is, let's start assessing it from a spiritual side. After the French Revolution, there was the ascendancy of the reform and conservative movements. Interestingly enough, you start studying who the leaders were, the conservative reform, you'll find a direct line to the Sabbatian families in Europe of the Frankists.
So they infiltrated back into Judaism and made these cut-off religions. They formed conservative and reformed Jewry.
Right.
Okay, because before that there was only Torah-observant Jews. You were a Jew, period.
Right, and there was solidarity among all the Jews. After Shabtai Tzvi, you couldn't trust anybody anymore.
Mm-hmm. Where is Shabtai Tzvi buried, by the way?
He's buried in Albania.
Do people go and visit his grave? And
I understand they do. It's a Sufi shrine.
It's a Sufi shrine, which is Islam.
Sufi is a Gnostic movement in Islam, which seemed to have been a tremendous influence on the Sabbatian movement. And the Sufi go all the way back in history, prior to even Islam. And this business about virgins being a gift if you kill for Allah came from a particular Sufi cult, which were also Illuminati, according to one of the experts, Spence, who wrote an encyclopedia on the occult, claims that one of the Sufi cults were the assassins. Why are they called the assassins from hashish? The people would have hashish, and Hassan ibn Saba, the old man of the mountain, had a bunch of people that would assassinate people, and because they had hashish all the time, they were called assassins. So he equates the Illuminati with this movement, the old Illuminati prior to the 1776 organization of Illuminati. Now Hassan,
yeah, because that's again learning about Islam and Islam's effect on the world and how Islam pretty much damn near conquered everything. But yeah, they're saying that's why as well Europe has a lot of kind of Arabic words, and one of them, I says, is assassin. It comes from an Arabic, it comes from Islamic background, basically. Yeah, it is. It's hashashin or whatever it is. Hash, because yeah, they smoked weed, basically. But yeah, there's a lot of Arabic words that we have because of that. Like, yeah, I really would recommend it. Looking into the Islamic, I'll probably do some videos on it eventually. But the Islamic conquest of Europe and how literally they were like this close to conquering like all of Europe. It was only France, really. France kind of, yeah, beat them, basically. They failed taking France, and it kind of knocked back the invasion. And then they got beat back by the English and the French and whoever wanted to join in to have their sins forgiven. But yeah, that's this part, sweet.